Former five-star prospect Ian Jackson of North Carolina enters the transfer portal, and I'm going to tell you why the Illini might be a mystery team to look out for.
You are Locked On Illini, your daily podcast on the Illinois Fighting Illini. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome one, welcome all to another episode of Locked On Illini. Thank you all so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. My name is Sonny Verma, your host here at Locked On Illini. Again, daily coverage every single day, anywhere from 25 to 35 minutes, and breaking news. So if you're an Illini fan, a supporter, alum, whatever it is, make sure you've hit that like button and make sure you've subscribed to this channel and share it with your friends. Why not? If they enjoy Illini content, this is the place to be. Speaking of places to possibly be, it's the transfer portal. Apparently, a lot of kids are getting rich by entering the transfer. Just because April 7th has passed, the courts have not quite made a ruling when it comes to NIL yet. And so you're seeing names continue to drop in to the portal, and arguably no bigger name than Ian Jackson, the five-star guard out of North Carolina, has announced that he is going to be entering the transfer portal. And if you have any North Carolina friends in your life, they wouldn't necessarily be shocked if I told them that Ian Jackson wasn't going to be playing for them next year. They'd just go ahead and presume that he was going to be playing in the NBA. But doesn't look like that's going to be the case. I guess it just didn't work out in Hubert Davis's system, and Ian Jackson's going to be playing college basketball at a different spot next season. Ian Jackson, just to give you a little update on him, he was a five-star athlete, ranked number 8 in the country last year. And, if you ever wanted to know what doing my job was like, let me give you a little glimpse into my life. So Ian Jackson enters the transfer portal, right? First thing I do is I see what year he was last year. Okay, no problem. What teams were recruiting him? Kentucky. Okay, now my eyes open up a little bit. Where is he from? Bronx, New York. Okay, now my eyes and ears are perked up, because you know who was also at Kentucky 2 years ago? And do you know who also has a big influence from the Bronx? That's right, our very own Orlando Antigua. And so I wanted to do a little digging, because right now there's a lot of other teams being mentioned with Ian Jackson, namely St. John's. But I do think that it's just not being mentioned enough when it comes to Illinois, because we know Orlando Antigua has those connections, and I think we're going to be involved in the conversation. To help me talk a little bit about Ian and the possibilities of whether he'd be a good fit at Illinois, I'm bringing back on my good friend JR from the Big Ten Huddle. JR, thank you again for joining me for the second straight day.
Hey, glad to be here.
So, JR, like a quick update for those of you who may not be familiar with Jackson's resume. Last year, again, as the number 8 prospect in the country, one of the top freshmen that in the entire country, in 36 games, he averaged 11.9 points per game, 2.7 rebounds, 1 assist on 45.6% shooting, and 39.5 when it comes to three-point shooting. Now, those are the basic stats. JR, the reason I bring you on is because you can dive a little bit deeper when it comes to statistics. So I'll kind of hand it over to you.
Yeah, I got the CBB analytics. By the way, use code HUDDLE, HUDDLE, for $30 off there. That's my shameless plug there. Use CBB analytics to kind of look deeper into some of these stats, because you look at the surface level of things. He was nearly a 40% three-point shooter. He was somebody that played, nearly 24 minutes per game. So you might be thinking, oh, okay, this might be a guy who had a good freshman season. I mean, he had a good freshman season against subpar teams, but down the stretch against teams like Ole Miss and Duke, he was getting only about 10 minutes per game. It was not exactly the same, but similar to a Xavier Booker situation at Michigan State. I would say his three-point percentage in quad one games dropped from 39.5% to 32.7%. And if you know anything about North Carolina, they didn't win very many of those quad one games. So his three-point percentage in the wins was 45.5%. That sounds great, right? Only problem is they beat a whole bunch of teams that were really bad because the ACC is basically a glorified mid-major conference at this point. Like Duke is really good, but that's about it.
And Kelvin Sampson,
And
what did he call
that's
him?
kind
The
of what
Toy Poodle
Ian.
League? Yeah.
Yeah, that was awesome. But as far as I'm concerned, like Ian Jackson, you go deep into his numbers, some stuff looks pretty good on the surface, but once you start looking at those quad one games, his assist percentage drops below 5%. You start looking at second chance points, and that's not good, and then it drops even lower in games after that. As he was playing the 2 guard, so it's not like he was playing point guard, but still averaging less than 1 assist per game when you look at the assist to turnover ratio against quad one teams. He was in the 2nd percentile. Like, I don't want to trash the kid and say that he wasn't any good or anything like that, but when you look at a freshman, you're looking at, defensive issues and possibly some, turnover issues and stuff like that. From what I saw from Ian Jackson, and I watched North Carolina for mostly the end of the year because that was kind of when they were on the bubble. And as most of you know, I'm an Ohio State fan, so Ohio State was on the bubble. So I was watching them a little bit more. I wasn't impressed at all, Sonny. I mean, like, when games were needed for this North Carolina team, Hubert Davis just went away from Jackson because he wasn't playing with fire. He wasn't playing good defense. He wasn't sharing the ball very much, and he was putting up some pretty bad shots against teams like Southern. That's good, right? That's fine. You can hit those shots because the defense isn't nearly as good. But then you start looking at these quad one games, and it's like they were probably hoping Ian Jackson was the next RJ Davis. He was not RJ Davis at all.
Yeah, I somewhat agree with you, but for the most part, disagree with you. Only in the sense that I think a lot of that wasn't necessarily an Ian Jackson problem. It was a Hubert Davis problem. I have similar thoughts a year ago when Trey White committed to the Illini. He had okay numbers from Louisville, but to me, Louisville was just a program in disarray and that they had a lot going on and a lot of it was not good. I think it's the same mood in North Carolina. And I think this is one of the reasons that Ian Jackson is ultimately leaving Chapel Hill. I just don't think it's a good situation out there. Truthfully, Ian, I think again, he has a relationship with Orlando here. I think Ian needs to be put in a situation where he can be the guy. He can go in and you can count on him to take shots. I don't think he's a point guard. I absolutely don't think he's a point guard, which is fine because Illinois already has a point guard in Kylan Boswell. And you know what Illinois doesn't have? They don't really have a 2-guard yet. And they don't really have what I've called on the show the alpha, the one guy who you can just give the ball to and say, hey, try to score 15, 20 points. I don't know who the leading scorer on next year's team is. I think Ian Jackson is that type of player. Ian needs to be put on a team where he's going to shoot a lot of shots and they may or may not go in. But the way Illinois is built around offensive rebounds, I actually think that this team is built well for his skill set. And I do think that Ian, again, going through like a second-year jump could be an absolute asset for Illinois.
Well, and you're not exactly wrong when you say, like, if this is what you want Ian Jackson to be, he could be that, because when you look at the wins, his usage rate does go up. When you look at the 3-point percentage, like I said, that goes up. But not just that, the turnover percent went down in those wins. And when you think about it, like I said, this North Carolina team, nobody was really all that good against quad one teams. So if Ian Jackson, maybe for whatever reason, this just wasn't the right situation for him, like if that is the problem for Illinois, they need somebody in that 2-guard spot, and Ian Jackson finds himself in a better situation. Maybe Orlando Antigua has that relationship, like you mentioned at the beginning, that can help him develop along there. You could find a guy that's comfortable with that usage rate. Now, his usage rate was up above 25% in those wins. I think Illinois is going to have enough playmakers that he doesn't have to have that usage rate, but still, I would say this is a guy that even after his freshman year seemed to be comfortable with a usage rate that high and might be able to fit that role that you're talking about there for Illinois.
I'm going to call you on the spot. Rate the ceilings of the 3 players, because if you bring in Ian Jackson, that pretty much is going to take up your entire NIL that you have available. So that means you're going to have limited NIL available, or probably nothing left for a Will Riley or a Dame Sarr. So let's just talk about ceiling first. Rate, in your opinion, 1 to 3 between those 3 guys.
Will Riley, number one for sure, just because I've seen it. I've seen the development of it. I've seen him under Brad, and I think Brad found what he wanted from Will Riley later on in the year. Dame Sarr, I think, but I haven't seen him in college basketball yet, so I am a little hesitant to say second there, but just based off the tape that I've seen, I think Dame Sarr is their second. And then if we're talking ceiling, Ian Jackson, like he has as much of a ceiling as Dame Sarr does. Like you look at some of his gameplay, you look at some of his stats, he flashed. The biggest thing for him is consistency. Can he find consistency at a program like Illinois where maybe there is, I mean, it's a rabid fan base, but it's, maybe not the pressure of playing at, North Carolina or something like that. Like, I don't know. But Brad Underwood, Orlando Antigua, these are guys that have dealt with high profile players with high ceilings before. We saw what they did with Will Riley being able to get there. We saw what they did with a guy like Marcus Tomask and Terrence Shannon Jr. I know those aren't exactly, like for like players with Ian Jackson, but they are players with high ceilings, and they were able to get them there. So a young guy like Ian Jackson, if they can bring him in and hold on to him and keep helping that consistency time and time again, I think that ceiling is probably closer to Dame Sarr and Will Riley than some people want to give it credit for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when it comes to ceiling, it has to be Will Riley, just because, as you said, we saw it. And in particular, he was the best player on this Illinois team for that last month of last year. And I can only imagine what he's going to look like in year two. If we're talking NBA, maybe the ceiling goes back towards Ian Jackson, because again, he was a even more highly touted prospect than Will was in the same class. I like Dame Sarr. I think just Dame's a little more raw, and so I'm just kind of curious to see how his game's going to translate to college level. Whereas I've already seen Will, and I've already seen Ian. Ian again didn't have a great freshman year, but I do think that his skill set would fit pretty well with what Illinois is kind of lacking when it comes to their offense. Let me know in the chat. Rank them 1, 2, 3. Who would you like to see? If you were Brad Underwood, if you were Josh Whitman, and you got to allot those NIL funds, who would you want to see? Ian Jackson, Will Riley, or Dame Sarr? There's nothing like the energy of a live game, whether it's catching a last-minute Cubs showdown or soaking in the excitement of a Bulls game. I'm kidding. There's no excitement watching Bulls games. But finding great seats at a great price, that's used to be a challenge until I found Game Time. Game Time makes last-minute tickets easier than ever. Prices actually drop as the event gets closer. And with their all-in pricing, you see the total cost upfront, no surprises at checkout. And their lowest price guarantee means I never worry about overpaying. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And welcome back. Again, if you haven't hit the like button yet, if you hadn't hit the subscribe button yet, please do. We're going to be talking football, basketball all summer long. So even though it's the off season when it comes to sports, there's no off season here at Locked on Illini. We just got done talking about Ian Jackson and the transfer portal, and I just want to kind of take a step back. I'm lucky enough to have JR on the show with me, and he covers the entire Big Ten for the Big Ten Huddle show on YouTube. So I figure if we're talking transfer portal, let's just take a look at the Big Ten perspective about how some of our competitors are doing. And there's no better guy than JR to bring on for that. You good with that, JR?
Let's do it.
So let's just start right at the top. Who's considered to have one of the top classes when it comes to the transfer portal?
Yeah, when you look at the 24/7 rankings, which 24/7 does it a little bit different, they just take all the players that are coming into the team. They're not taking out like all the players that have left or anything like that. So teams at the top are naturally going to be teams like Michigan is number 2, Indiana is number 5, and Iowa is number 6. I think the closest one after that might be Maryland or something like that, or Wisconsin. Wisconsin's the next one after that. They've got 3 players right now, but to me the transfer portal rankings are a little not always the best thing to go off of, because you look at the transfer portal rankings from last year. Like, look at the top 10 last year. I can tell you some of the teams that were in the top 10 last year: West Virginia, Kansas State. Like, are those teams that were in the portal? No, not exactly. So as much as people are giving a lot of love and a lot of credit to a team like Michigan, who has brought in 3 top 50 transfer portal players, one of those is probably going to go to the NBA, and the other 2, whenever you bring a guy in from the portal, who knows, right? Like, they have a high ranking, but John Tonji last year was one of the best players in the country. He was outside the top 400, right? Like, this is just kind of the way it goes with the transfer portal. I'm not trying to diss Michigan, but I am saying, like, just because they're number 2 in the transfer portal, I'm not picking them to be number 2 in the nation after this.
Yeah, it's one of those where, I'm not upset that Illinois isn't considered in the top 4, top 5, because it doesn't take into effect the retention aspect, right? If Tomislav Ivičić was in the transfer portal, he'd be a top 3 portal player, essentially. We retained him. We don't get any points for that. If Kylan Boswell, all of a sudden decided to enter the transfer portal, I'd imagine he'd be a top 30, top 35 player in the portal. He wasn't, but we ended up retaining him. So it's like we don't necessarily get points for that. And obviously the prospects that we're kind of going after right now, it seemingly are more of the European variety. And I don't think those really factor in all that much when it comes to the rankings. But speaking of, just who's in and who's out, JR, let's just kind of take a look at the list that you've actually been so kind to put together for us.
Yeah, so these are all of the players who are entering into their program. So obviously here at the top, you got Illinois with Zvonimir, Big Z, and then Indiana has 3 right now. Iowa, I don't need to explain it to everybody. The list goes on and on. So there are teams that have a number more that are committed to them, and then there's also teams like Rutgers that they just got their first one today. Penn State doesn't have any. Michigan State doesn't have any at this point. So I think this is a much better way to look at the portal myself, is who are the actual players that are coming into them, and then on the other side you can see who are the actual players that have left. That Maryland number is much bigger. That Iowa number is much bigger. Indiana, those are all much, much bigger. And when you look at Illinois, you say, oh, well, that one's bigger too. Okay, Sonny, you tell me. I'm not trying to disparage anybody, but you tell me, were these guys key contributors that made Illinois who they were last year? Obviously, Trey White, Morez Johnson were contributing players, but Kerry Booth? No.
No. No one was surprised to see Kerry Booth not on this team next year.
Yeah, I like Dre Gibbs Lawhorn, but DGL, no, right?
It just wasn't a good fit for this team.
Yeah. Keaton Kutcher. See, I don't even know how to pronounce his last name.
Walk on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Walk on. Yeah.
Which walk-on, love that they had their time at the school. Don't want to disparage walk-ons, but still, let's not act like it's a, huge portal loss or anything like that. So I've been listening to your show. I've been hearing people talk about Michigan's portal class and this, that, and the other, and I get it. But I'm also with you, where it's like Tomislav Ivičić is top 3, top 5 player in the portal if he enters in. You know who's the number 5 portal player and on 3 right now? Tell me who you would rather have on your team. Jacoby Gillespie or Tomislav Ivičić?
Oh, no question. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about Tommy being arguably the best big man behind TKR returning to the Big Ten Conference next year. You're a top 5 center in the entire country. He's going to be entering his year 2 in college, which is historically, when players make their biggest leaps when it comes to contributions, he's going to be like 22 years old next year. Like, he's a man. There's no doubt in my mind I'd rather have Tommy. And I said that in essentially the first episode of the offseason. My number 1 priority was to retain Tomislav Ivičić.
Right. And then we keep going down, and, Michigan State, they've got 3 guys in there right now, really only 2 contributors from last year. And then Michigan, Trey Donaldson, Sam Walters. I mean, you tell me, Sonny. I'm not trying to put you on the spot here. We didn't talk about that. We were going to, exactly talk about this. But would you rather have Trey Donaldson or Elliot Cadeau? One of them seems a little bit more proven to me.
10 out of 10 times Trey Donaldson. Like, that's just a trade that, again, there's a lot of people when I went live a couple days ago hyping up Michigan. And maybe it's because of the Morez situation, which I get. People are still feeling a little hurt by that. But, again, Tommy's better than Morez Johnson. Morez Johnson, it hurts more for the culture aspect. When you talk about strictly what he displayed on the basketball court, he's still a growing player. I'm sure by year 3, by year 4, he may end up being an outstanding college basketball player. But Elliot Cadeau, I'm not impressed with at all. I think he was a downgrade when it comes to the point guard position. Morez Johnson hopefully can make some sort of leap. We'll see. But Michigan's losing a lot of players, JR. And I'm not as locked in on that Michigan Wolverines being a Big Ten favorite as I think a lot of the people in my comment section are. Like far and away, of course, Purdue. I mean, they might be ranked number 1 in the country in the preseason poll. So, of course, they're going to be favorites in the conference. But I feel like a lot of people are already handing number 2 over to the Michigan Wolverines. And I don't know. I'm taking a look at this list you have in front of me. I'm not sold yet.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan, if they bring Yaxel Lindeberg back.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that would be a difference
maybe
maker.
top 10, top 5, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
But
he's a difference maker.
He said it himself, though. 80-20. Like, he's 80% going to the draft. So, like, this was just insurance in case he doesn't get paid the way he thinks he will at the NBA. He's going to go to Michigan and get paid, $3 million or whatever the rumor is there as well. I don't know if that's out. It's just a rumor, so nobody's confirmed that. But at this point, good on Michigan to bring in some good players, but you've got 2 good players, but mostly their portal rankings are really high because they're young, and that's the way 24/7 and them do this, and then you go from there. But as we keep going down, like Oregon's lost 4 guys, Ohio State lost 4 guys, Penn State, Purdue, like people want to say, oh no, Illinois lost 5 guys. Like I agree, Illinois needs to retain more guys. I was saying that, but you're not in the worst position here than a lot of other schools. Like Ohio State lost 4, Oregon lost 4, Penn State lost 4, Purdue lost 4. Purdue, the program that nobody ever leaves and only everybody ever wants to come program, to, right, yeah. Sonny?
Exactly right. But JR, you do bring up a point which I've been trying to tell my everydayers on Locked on Illini and just all the viewers in general. There's a lot of panic because we're really only paying attention to what's going on in Champaign and for Illinois. But I really suggest that if you can take a step back and take a look at these rosters of the other Big Ten teams. Again, sure enough, Purdue's right up there, number 1, no doubt. And Michigan, if Yaxel comes back, fine. I'll give him that number 2 spot just because I think that highly of Yaxel. But again, as you said, 20% chance. But otherwise, a lot of these competition that Illinois has is actually in a lot worse situation and shape than Illinois is. Michigan State losing those 3 guys, I still want to see who they bring in to replace that culture program. And Tom Izzo doesn't usually work with transfer portals, right? Like he's historically known for that. So the fact that he's going to have to do that next year, how does he incorporate the new guys? Does he go after veterans or does he try to replace them with young freshmen like he's traditionally used to? It says, I know Michigan State had a fantastic year last year. They won the conference by 3 games or whatnot. But I really want to see how well Tom Izzo adapts to this new world that is the transfer portal.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan State, their thing was the depth, right? And they could play games longer than anybody else. Jace Richardson came on, became that star, and that was huge for them. If your game is depth, losing contributors, and one of them being a key contributor in Trey Holloman, that's not good for you, especially with Jace Richardson leaving. Right. Like, I think Jackson Kohler coming back is good. I think Jeremy Fears is coming back is good, but none of these guys scream to me what a Tomislav Visic is. None of these guys scream to me what a Bruce Thornton is for Ohio State or, some of these other guys that are coming back to their schools. I think Connor Essegian be coming back to Nebraska. I don't think that's been officially announced yet, but it's supposed to happen. I think either him or Griffiths was going to leave, and Griffiths left today. So as far as I'm concerned, like he's going to be a player that is going to be much higher regarded next year with his shooting and everything he does. So that's all I really wanted to do here. I just wanted to give your viewers the opportunity to look, tangibly and not just at rankings, because I think rankings are deceiving. You have to understand the rankings cater more toward young players. The rankings cater more toward guys who already have their name in the NBA draft and some of that stuff. Even if Tomislav Visic wasn't a top 3 guy because he's a little bit older, he's still one of the top 3 talent. He would still be one of the top 3 talents in the transfer portal, or top 5 talents at the very least. So that's all I really wanted to do here, was just kind of make sure your viewers see firsthand, maybe Illinois isn't in as bad of a situation as some people think.
There you have it. Like, just because you don't trust me because you think I come with some sort of bias, JR again covers the entire Big Ten conference for the Big Ten Huddle. JR, before I let you go, why don't you let the folks know more about the Big Ten Huddle?
Yeah, the Big Ten Huddle. We cover basketball and football. We have a football channel, the Big Ten Huddle - football. Me, Zach, and Jeff covering things over there. And the basketball channel, it's me by myself, occasionally bringing on guests. But right now, there's so much portal activity. I'm just covering it by myself because it's wild out there. We talked players that could possibly leave the Big Ten, players that could possibly come to the Big Ten. A lot of portal content over there. And you know what? Nebraska just won a Crown championship. So, you got to come over there and listen to that talk, right? I mean, the only Big Ten team to win a championship nationally since 2000, the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Maybe they'll win a tournament game soon.
All right, Jared, thank you so much. I'm sure we're going to see you back on here soon enough.
All right, thanks, Sonny. We'll do.
And to wrap things up, I did want to mention that the Illini women's team is not immune themselves to the transfer portal. As forward, Shea Bolin has entered the transfer portal. She didn't play at all last year, but the year previous, the WBIT championship season, she played in 29 games, averaged 8 minutes, 2 points, and 1.5 rebounds a game. She's one of those culture, energetic players off the bench that the team absolutely found her very valuable. I wish Shea nothing but the best moving forward. Truthfully, when it comes to what Shauna Green is doing, is she's bringing in a lot of talent when it comes to the women's side of basketball. And I can't repeat myself enough. If you're a fan of basketball, if you're a fan of women's athletics, or first and foremost, if you are just a fan of Illini athletics, please pay attention to the women's basketball team. I promise you next year, I'm going to try to do a better job of covering that basketball team. Maybe I'll bring on a contributor who can talk a little bit more in depth about games in and out. But I will tell you, Shauna Green, the program that she's building with the women's basketball team is a program that we all should absolutely be proud of. That's going to wrap it up for today's edition of Locked On Illini. Again, content each and every day. So if you're not subscribed, make sure you are. And if you are, go send it to an old roommate at U of I or another alum in your life. I promise you, I'm going to do my best to bring you quality content each and every day. Until next time, ILL. Love you guys.